Could the war in Ukraine spread further into Europe? And if it did, how well prepared would Germany's military, the Bundeswehr, be? NATO is carrying out military manoeuvres with Russia as the hypothetical enemy. The Ukraine conflict has seen tanks go from predators to prey. Air attacks from drones are frequently influencing the course of the war.
The buzzing of little drones is everywhere. You don't know whether they're friendly or the enemy.
Self-driving combat vehicles are being developed, but using them in real-world conflicts could have disastrous consequences.
In the worst case, a school bus could be mistaken for a tank.
Will future wars be determined by people or machines? Can modern air defences protect us from enemy missiles?
We shouldn't prepare for the last war, we should prepare for the next war and hope that it doesn't come.
Just how dangerous are new hypersonic weapons? Can Germany's Bundeswehr keep up?
It will be a very bloody, high-intensity war, with a lot of firepower and enormous losses, including civilian casualties, of course.
It may not come to that, but if it did, would the German military be prepared? On NATO's radar screens, confrontations are part of everyday life. Russian warplanes test NATO's surveillance of its airspace.
How's Netherlands?
Russian bombers fly provocative mock attacks. Almost every day, there are threatening encounters between Russian and Western fighters over the...
What time is it over there? Can you hear me? Oh, is it getting warm?
Baltic or North Sea. This kind of military posturing is reminiscent of the Cold War. In its war against Ukraine, Russia uses modern Kinjal hypersonic missiles launched from warplanes. If fired from over the North or the Baltic Seas, they could theoretically hit targets in Europe.
If Germany were in a war with Russia, it would be the deployment zone for NATO troops. So Russia would attack targets on German soil with extreme force, including with ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, drones and cyber attacks.
In Lithuania, Germany and its allies are training to defend the EU's northeastern border. From 2026, a German tank brigade with almost 5,000 soldiers will permanently secure NATO's eastern flank. NATO is practicing tactically challenging beach landings on the Baltic coast. The aim, to create a deterrence against a conflict that could put Estonia, Latvia and Lithuania on the front lines.
That could turn the Baltic states into a future combat zone, fought over by Russia and NATO, possibly without the United States.
NATO's eastern flank stretches around 3,000 kilometres from North Cape in Norway, Europe's northernmost point, via Finland south to Romania. German NATO troops are currently stationed in Lithuania. The war in Ukraine has brought a lot of military conventional wisdom into question, including the central role that tanks play in ground warfare. Russia has already lost several thousand tanks, mainly due to attacks by drones and anti-tank missiles. Especially in the early days of the Ukraine war, American-made Javelin missiles inflicted heavy losses on Russian tank units. The Javelins struck their targets from above, flying up to 150 meters into the air before plummeting downwards and hitting the weaker armor of the tank's turret. At the beginning of the conflict, there were hopes of a quick victory for Ukraine, though it soon became clear that this war would be different. Tanks have gone from being predators to prey. Meanwhile, developments in missile and drone technology pose a new threat. Even seemingly harmless civilian devices like cell phones can be used against tanks.
Quite quickly after the Russian invasion of Ukraine, an administrative app was converted so that citizens who'd previously used it to report parking offences could now report where Russian tanks were.
Digital tools helped Ukraine resist the invading Russian tanks. But many militaries, including the German Bundeswehr, continue to prioritise improving their tanks. Many modern armoured units use what's called reactive armour, which explodes incoming projectiles before they reach the actual hull of the tank. Not all of Germany's tanks have this technology. These new active protection systems are designed to stymie anti-tank weapons. Israel has developed a hard kill protection system called Trophy, which shoots down an approaching anti-tank projectile before it hits. The technology could increase the survival rate of tanks in combat. The German Bundeswehr has only ordered a few of the systems, and Russia responded by declaring that its own anti-tank weapons could disable them. Russia also has its own modern technology. The modernised T-90 tank can fire while travelling at full speed and has reinforced armour on its turret. There are also new devices to protect against anti-tank missiles. The Storer system relies on lasers. But tanks alone can no longer be decisive in a war. In the conflict in Ukraine, artillery is once again playing a key role. The US-made HIMARS system has a range of 80 kilometres and high accuracy. There were hopes it could hit Russian logistics behind the front line. But after initial successes, Russian forces adapted.
It's not a game changer in the sense that these long-range weapon systems aren't decisive in warfare. Our own field research shows that the effect of individual HIMARS missiles on the battlefield has been greatly reduced. That's in part because the Russians have deployed powerful electronic equipment to divert missiles from their targets, and to ensure that when they do hit their targets, the warheads don't detonate.
Perhaps the future of ground combat will be dominated by numerous and relatively inexpensive drones lurking above the battlefield. In the months following Russia's invasion, Ukrainian drones played a decisive role. Hardly any Russian artillery or tanks were safe from them. Even when tanks are well camouflaged, their wide track marks can reveal their location. The small Ukrainian drones fly at speeds of up to 80 kilometers per hour, with a range of several kilometers. But there are also armed drones. The Russian military developed countermeasures and began targeting Ukrainian drone pilots. Russia's army is deploying more and more drones of its own, both for reconnaissance flights over the front lines and to attack civilian targets. Heavily armed aircrafts like this one also fall under the category of drones. This is the Turkish-made Bayraktar, used in Ukraine. It's the size of a small airplane and returns to its base after missions. The Russian Orion can carry at least 2 laser-guided missiles. But Russia is only able to produce it in small quantities because importing the necessary computer chips has been hampered by Western sanctions. And often, the threat from these drones can be countered by comparatively old technology. Anti-aircraft guns like those on the German so-called Cheetah tank can reliably and cheaply shoot them down. However, the German military has decommissioned all of its Cheetah tanks. Dozens are now being made operational again for Ukraine, joining newer models like the Sky Ranger. NATO also has other methods to counteract drones, such as nets and electronic jamming devices like the Drone Buster. But it's clear the Bundeswehr's drone defences are still lacking. What we call modern warfare almost always begins with airstrikes. For decades, fighter pilots were considered the military elite. Air combat often involved one pilot pitted against another, using complex flight manoeuvres. But in the 21st century, things look different. Missiles and especially long-range radar are changing things. Today, air battles are fought over long distances. Meanwhile, modern warplanes are simply too expensive to risk in direct combat.
The dogfight, like in the movies, so what we'd call basic fighter maneuvers, is not necessarily the core of what most fighter pilots would be doing in a major war. They'd be conducting longer-range engagements.
The German Air Force's Eurofighter is considered a powerful weapon, but an outdated one.
The issue for the Eurofighter is it is not a stealth aircraft, and it is not particularly well adapted also for going after ground-based air defences.
The Russian exclave of Kaliningrad lies on the Baltic Sea. As well as nuclear-powered Iskander missiles, modern anti-aircraft missiles are also stationed there. With a range of up to 400 kilometres, they're a serious threat to the Eurofighter. In addition to its outdated onboard radar, the Eurofighter also lacks the ability to interfere with the fire control radar of enemy air defence. To do that, it would need assistance from technology largely controlled by the United States. So in the event of a conflict, Russian air defence missiles could only be effectively countered with US support. In such an event, the US squadron of F-16s stationed in Germany would provide vital extra capabilities. If Washington were to withdraw the planes, the German military would have an extra problem to solve. But what about the potential opponent and its military strength? Russia has fewer than a quarter of the fighter planes that NATO has. Most of these aircraft are outdated, like the Su-27. Dating back to the Cold War, it mainly fires unguided weapons and is designed for ground operations. The Su-34 is more modern. It can detect enemy radar. Russia also has around 100 Su-35s. These advanced aircraft can track up to 30 targets simultaneously. They're considered to be effective against electronic jamming and well suited to ground operations. But they also have weaknesses.
They are very much the opposite of stealthy. They have a huge radar cross-section and they emit a huge amount of energy with their radars, so it's very easy to detect them.
In 21st century warfare, cruise missiles and rockets are often fired from aircraft hundreds or even over 1,000 kilometres away. But even that far from the enemy, fighter planes are not really safe. NATO could engage with Russian aircraft at great distances, and the West's aircraft are more modern. But the main burden of air defence would lie with US-made Patriot missiles. Germany has 9 Patriot systems, with 4 more on order. It would need more than that for a comprehensive air defence.
Why more? Because the defended area of the Patriot system is rather small. And the faster the incoming missile is, the smaller is the defended area. And against Kinjal, the calculations show that the defended area would be something like 50 or 60 kilometers in diameter. If you want to cover whole Germany, it's 50-something, 50-60.
The planned 13 Patriot batteries could protect Berlin and some military bases, but not much more than that. Germany has also purchased the Arrow 3 system from Israel to protect against long-range missiles. It cost around 4 billion euros.
I think the German investment in Arrow 3 is probably significantly less welcome, partly because it's an incredibly large amount of money, and so the opportunity cost is huge. You could have bought an enormous amount of other things for the same money as a small amount of Arrow 3. And the main issue is because it's Israeli, it's not integratable. It's not possible to integrate it inside the standard NATO recognized air picture.
The US has agreed to provide medium-range weapons to Germany in 2026, including modernized Tomahawk cruise missiles. Just like in the 1980s, missile ranges and warning times are crucial for defending against medium-range weapons. Russia has missiles such as the Kinjal that are fired from airplanes. But because those airplanes have to take off before they can fire, NATO would have time to react. Russia could also fire Iskander missiles from Kaliningrad with a range of 500 kilometers and a shorter warning time for those being attacked. In addition, there are sea-based Caliber missiles that can hit targets 2,500 kilometers away. The new US Tomahawks could be fired from Germany to target command centers and airfields in western Russia. NATO also has long-range air and sea-based cruise missiles. But because aircraft and ships need to be in position before firing, there are longer warning times involved. So land-based systems like the Tomahawk, due to be stationed in Germany, could be fired more quickly. From NATO's point of view, that's an important part of any deterrence strategy.
We're just talking about conventional weapon systems here, but they're far-reaching. They're difficult or even impossible for an enemy to intercept, and they're very accurate. They can be used to hit enemy decision-making centers, both political and military, or airfields where strategic bombers are stationed. So they fulfill a strategic role. That's why I believe that the Russian response to this will not only involve conventional weapons. Russia will also deploy additional new nuclear missiles to be aimed at Europe and specifically at Germany.
In 2018, Russian President Vladimir Putin unveiled a new generation of weapons. They include the Zircon missile, which is designed to beat air defenses. But experts have doubts about this supposed superweapon.
They are gliding. They don't use the hypersonic gliders. They don't use engine. So all speed they have is what they carry. And if they try to maneuver aerodynamically, they lose speed. They lose speed and lose altitude. So they cannot do that many times. So the whole idea of maneuverability it's a nice idea, but in reality, it doesn't work that well.
So are Putin's new weapons just propaganda? Not exactly. These hypersonic missiles are seemingly unassailable during the launch phase and can then change course in a targeted manner. That means that NATO air defences have to react more quickly. In addition to long-range radar, real-time satellite data is also needed. And there's a lot that's still not known about these weapons. At sea, the radar sensors of a NATO ship would detect an approaching hypersonic weapon at a distance of around 12 nautical miles, or just over 20 kilometres. With an approach coming at 6 times the speed of sound, there would be less than 20 seconds to react. The US is testing its own hypersonic weapons. These Dark Eagle systems will also be stationed in Germany, provided Washington delivers them. But some question whether high-tech equipment will be an effective deterrent against Putin's expansionism.
We can get missiles through to targets. The issue is we don't have enough missiles. And so going hypersonic increases the cost size, reduces the number of launch platforms. Even though you're increasing the probability of kill for each weapon, you're probably reducing your overall effectiveness if you tried to replace most of our cruise missiles with hypersonics, because you'd have so many fewer of them.
Modern warplanes, such as US-made F-35s, are likely to remain more important when it comes to deterrence. The F-35 marks a new era in air warfare. It's like a flying supercomputer with countless sensors. In the future, rather than onboard weapons, the processing of data streams and the prioritization of targets will determine victory or defeat in aerial combat. The plane's stealth design, which makes it difficult for enemy radar to detect, is key to this. Russia also relies on stealth technology. Although the first Su-57 crashed as it was being put into service, several of the planes are now operational. Media reports say more are set to be built. The Su-57 is said to use innovative infrared technology to fend off approaching enemy missiles, but production has stalled, mainly due to Western sanctions. NATO's most modern aircraft, the F-35, has been operational in Norway since 2017. The German Air Force, or Luftwaffe, has also ordered 35 of these high-tech warplanes. Cutting-edge technology and communication will play a central role on the battlefields of the future, something the Bundeswehr is working on. Small drones are sent in advance. Victory or defeat is determined by how well each element interacts, including all weapon systems and swarms of drones. Soldiers are still needed to storm and secure enemy positions. Only then do the expensive tanks and their crews follow. All of these components are networked and coordinated in real time.
This will mean that there will be more reliance on artificial intelligence, which will almost act as another crew member, although it won't be responsible perhaps for making decisions. So to give a few examples, AI algorithms may look at the images from a tank's sensors and say, this looks like a hostile tank, we're 90% sure, do you want to engage? And the crew will decide, yes we do, or no we don't.
Germany's Bundeswehr is testing unmanned vehicles. Self-driving tanks already exist, produced in Estonia and Israel. The US Army is training self-driving vehicles for commando units. They can cross terrain without a driver or any remote control. These moving robots use sensors to determine their path and their targets. It seems to be just a matter of time before we see fully automated combat. Another thing the German military will have to adapt to. When robots fight each other, what role will humans play? Will they control what's happening, or will they simply be at the mercy of technology?
With autonomous weapon systems, it all depends on the operational context. In my view, the more complex that context is, the more closely people will have to oversee the decisions that are made. In the worst case, a school bus could be mistaken for a tank, because the autonomous system thinks that's what it is. The system doesn't look at a bus and see a bus. It looks at certain individual data points in an image, and if those points suggest that it's a tank, then it could be confused for one.
Lighter units are faster, harder to detect, and cheaper. When well trained, they can stop heavily armoured brigades. Does that mean that heavy weaponry can be kept back behind the front lines?
You can certainly consider developing defence strategies that send a clear signal to the enemy that your side is not planning any offensives against them. That way, you contribute to security and also to the prevention of war.
It is possible to demonstrate strength while maintaining a defensive orientation. For example, Norwegian forces keep a clear distance from the Russian border during military exercises. But Germany's strategy is focused more on front-line defence, like during the Cold War. From 2026, a combat-ready German tank brigade will be stationed here in Lithuania.
The Russians may assume that Germany would be less of a risk than dealing, for example, with the forces of the nuclear powers deployed in Estonia, where you have the Americans, the British, and the French. And attacking Poland is a very big deal compared to dealing with a small Lithuanian army and a German brigade with very little actual combat experience. So yes, Lithuania would be a problem.
It would take reinforcements weeks, not days, to reach the front.
The reason why the German Bundeswehr wants to station a brigade in Lithuania is to establish this front line of defence and to delay a Russian attack, so that reinforcements can be brought in. That means that we can expect the greatest amount of firepower in the first few hours of a conflict. And we can also expect the greatest losses during those first few hours. Those losses will disproportionately affect German or NATO combat troops, fighter units, armoured infantry, tanks, warplanes, and so on. In the first few hours and days, losses could run into the tens of thousands. You have to ask whether NATO would be capable of absorbing losses like that. At the moment, it decidedly isn't.
As in almost all wars, it will depend on the troops on the ground, those closest to the enemy.
Size of force will certainly count. Unless there's some kind of nuclear conflict early on, then size of force will play a big role. And that's a problem, because that's a kind of war that Europeans can no longer wage and no longer want to wage. And it's no longer politically justifiable either.
The German Bundeswehr is facing major challenges. The potential wars of the future will be fought using new weapons, including robots, drones, and AI. But the desire to have a sophisticated defence force should not obscure the fact that even the most modern warfare leads to unimaginable suffering, potential war crimes, death, and destruction. Simply investing in weapons technology is not enough. Even if armed forces remain indispensable, everything possible should be done to prevent conflict. Defence begins with diplomacy.
A stunning retreat by Russia, humiliating losses on the battlefields of Kharkiv.
Frankly, it's a sign that they're struggling badly on the Russian side.
At St. George Hall, in the Kremlin, in the midst of a crisis.
Russian losses are beginning to spark criticism of the Russian leader.
Russian officials packed the room. They knew the war in Ukraine was going badly.
Calling his actions, quote, detrimental to Russia's and its citizens' future.
Their leader was at a critical juncture.
Президент Российской Федерации Владимир Владимирович Путин.
Vladimir Putin would make it clear what his intentions were and who the enemy really was.
Западные страны веками твердят о том, что они несут другим народам свободу и демократию. Все с точностью да наоборот.
Vladimir Putin needs to somehow justify the horrific sacrifices that Russians are making on his orders by broadening the aperture, making this about something bigger, into some kind of conflict with the United States, with the West, with NATO. Take your pick.
Диктат США строится на грубой силе, на кулачном праве.
I think it's a very dangerous moment. It's a dangerous moment for Ukraine. I think it's a dangerous moment for Russia because it's hard to see what the pathway forward is. It's a dangerous time.
It was a dramatic escalation. Putin leaving no doubt his war was against the United States and the West. It is a war that he has been waging for years, confronting 5 American presidents on a path that has brought Russia and the United States to the brink. It began during the height of the Cold War.
There is such change taking place in the communist world.
We must take actions to assist the campaign for democracy.
During the presidency of Ronald Reagan.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
At the time, Vladimir Putin was a young KGB officer stationed in Germany, trained to fight the United States.
He wasn't a professional politician. He was, in fact, a professional agent for the KGB. So he would have learned about the West in the frame of the adversary, the enemy, or at least certainly all of the reasons in which there would be to be suspicious about the West.
For Lieutenant Colonel Putin, the collapse of the Soviet Union, spurred on by an American president, was a defining moment.
In the thousands, they are here in the tens of thousands. Here, the feeling is the end of the Cold War.
You can only imagine what it must have been like as a young KGB officer. Your country disappears or is in the process of disappearing. You're there on the front lines. The Communist Party obviously will lose its raison d'etre, and so it must have been devastating. And I think that must have been a severe blow.
As we celebrate Christmas, this day of peace and hope,
the humiliation at the hands of the U.S. continued as the next American president, George H.W. Bush, declared the end of the Soviet era a triumph.
Eastern Europe is free. The Soviet Union itself is no more. This is a victory for democracy and freedom. It's a victory for the moral force of our values.
Vladimir Putin sees American talk of human rights, democracy, freedom as a cynical fig leaf, something that the U.S. uses to cover itself as it cynically pursues its interests across the globe, as it pushes its agenda across the globe.
Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin.
In Moscow today, an unprecedented peaceful passing of power.
As he ascended to the presidency, Vladimir Putin was determined to restore Russian strength and empire.
Russians are looking for a strong hand to lead the country. Vladimir Putin, it appears, is their man.
He came to see himself as almost ordained to lead Russia at this moment and to lead Russia back to greatness. If that is your ordained mission, then there aren't a lot of limits on the means you can use to achieve that goal.
President Clinton arrived in Moscow carrying a message of cooperation.
As president, Putin carried his simmering grievance with the United States into his first meeting with President Bill Clinton.
Arriving at the Kremlin for their first presidential encounter, both leaders wanted...
President Clinton wanted to get a little bit of feel. He wanted to meet him in the Kremlin as president.
Two presidents, one near the end of his term, the other beginning a new era.
Putin was wary of the American president, who had championed the spread of liberalization and democracy in Russia.
Putin conveys a huge amount through body language. He tries to show you that he's the alpha male in the room through the way he spreads his legs, through the way he slouches a bit in his chair, through the way that he will look at people and kind of give them a dismissive hand wave.
His first meeting with Clinton, he was a cold fish. We had no interest in dealing with Clinton. Clinton felt insulted and rebuffed. Putin didn't want to have anything to do with Clinton.
If Mr. Clinton was hoping for a foreign policy triumph, he won't get it here.
Later that day, Clinton received a warmer reception from Putin's mentor, former President Boris Yeltsin. And he issued a warning about the new Russian president.
Bill Clinton looked hard into Yeltsin's eyes and said, I'm a little bit concerned about this young man that you have turned over the presidency to. He doesn't have democracy in his heart. And he reached over and poked him in his heart. And I will never forget the expression that came over Yeltsin. I think it really shook Yeltsin a bit.
But in front of the cameras, Clinton walked a careful line, not revealing his concerns about Putin.
If you want to know what my personal assessment is, I think he is fully capable of building a prosperous, strong Russia while preserving freedom and pluralism and the rule of law. It's a big challenge. I think he's fully capable of doing it.
But from the start, Clinton's private fears about Putin were being realized.
From the very beginning, you saw in Putin somebody who didn't have the values of the West. Piece by piece, he is dismantling the structures of democracy, fragile though they were, that had been put in place, and reconsolidating control in the Kremlin. That's not a Westernizer. That's not a Democrat, small d. That's an old-fashioned Russian autocrat that we saw and should have seen from the very beginning.
Literally one of the closest elections in American history.
It was the start of a new presidency in the U.S.
Electoral votes will go to George W. Bush, the governor of Texas.
And the winner had expressed optimism about being able to get along with Putin.
Howdy to the new president of the United States.
I look forward to working with Mr. Putin and explaining my point of view and my attitude about the post-Cold War era. I'm going to look him right in the eye and say, you're no longer the enemy. And we're not your enemy. Surely we can work together. We're a peaceful nation. And that we look forward to working together with Russia.
Putin saw in President Bush someone that he could do business with. He was seeking a new great power relationship, that President Bush could be a leader who he could work with to redefine the international system.
Putin's early moves, consolidating power, and his past as a KGB agent didn't deter the Bush team.
Didn't bother me that Putin was KGB. In the KGB, you were taught to think for yourself, so actually that struck us as an opportunity. I don't think anybody was looking at this through rose-colored glasses, but we thought at the strategic level there were real opportunities to work together.
President George Bush has called for a new approach.
The two presidents would size each other up
Meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin
at a summit in the former communist state of Slovenia.
This is more about the president and Putin developing a personal relationship at the beginning.
Vladimir Putin, as someone who had, I'm sure, a very thick dossier on President Bush, was trying to find his weaknesses, appeal to his personality traits.
Putin went for Bush's strong Christian faith.
President Putin told President Bush about the time his dacha burned down and a religious medallion which had belonged to his mother, which had gotten lost, and he thought this was irretrievably gone, and then a fireman brought him this kind of almost like a holy relic. It was a very affecting, emotional story, and had some effect on President Bush.
Question to President Bush, is this a man that Americans can trust?
I'll answer the question. I looked the man in the eye. I found it to be very straightforward. I was able to get a sense of his soul. He's a man deeply committed to his country and the best interests of his country.
And Bush gives that line, right? That I looked into his eyes and got a sense of his soul. And we go, uh-oh. And Condi does her version of not comfortable. She just reacts, just for a second.
For the moment, Putin had won over the American